Well, Sir Antonio, thank you so much for giving us your time to talk about the symphonies of Vaughan Williams, particularly a London Symphony, which you've just conducted with the London Symphony Orchestra. And let's start with it as perhaps, if you put the Sea Symphony aside, the most graphic, the most illustrative of the Vaughan Williams symphonies. And I wonder if because of that, you feel any sort of need to sort of look back to the London of Edwardian times and sort of read up on the history of it, or do you just take the notes as they come?
Well, in terms of the the fog of London, I remember it as a young boy. The weather is quite different now, but of course, I think what has inspired me, just in my memory, the having seen those paintings by Monet, which are certainly um, an inspiration, and not only for me, um, but I think for anybody to get an idea of what London was really like, and the mystery of it. I mean, one can look at it as menacing and this brooding quality to the mists and the fog, but very suggestive of possibility, of potential, a great city, and how it comes to life. You know, Mahler did it with creatures at the beginning of the first symphony. I don't know, one can look at it that way, this kind of birth, but there's a feeling of birth at the beginning of the second symphony, but the birth of a great city.
Yeah.
And I feel that very strongly. What is unexpected is the reaction that the loudest sound I have ever heard is that silence right before the first chord that comes on the second beat, um, in fortissimo. The silence is louder. And it's really incredible as an idea.
Yeah.
Um, uh, it's so unexpected and so lacerating in a way, that opening. And that, you can't help but think that comes from something having to do with the war. You
Yeah.
know, it's almost impossible or impending, and it's I think in not debilitated. He wasn't debilitated, but he was certainly shell shocked in an emotional way. Was Vaughan Williams, and it impacts everything he does. And the um, you can get specific about which war, and this it doesn't matter. War in general and struggle and what it does to town centers and the population and family and spirit, and what it does to young people, all these things. So it has to be somehow trying to express something like that. I don't know. I
Yeah.
one cannot be specific, but it's pretty tough music, that.
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting you mentioned the threat of impending war because the epilogue, of course, at the very end, if we look at Tono Bungay, the H.G.
Yes.
Wells novel, what's happening at the end of the novel, and Vaughan Williams pointed Michael Kennedy towards this, a destroyer is actually going down the Thames out into the North Sea on trials. And of course, this is the period of the great Anglo-German naval race. So it's very interesting that you say that you sense impending war. Now, let me just pick up what you said about the Monet images of London,
Yes.
which of course have been used on CD sleeves for this symphony. Somebody who's reviewing your London Symphony performance in the last couple of days made comparisons with Respighi, but also Debussy. And I'm just wondering if your experience of conducting both of those does actually practically, technically help in the way that you uh, uh, paint the colors in the music.
Oh, most definitely. You know, I discovered Respighi quite late, but then when I did discover, I mean, of course, I was music director at the Orchestra of Santa Cecilia for 18 years. Once I discovered that music, I played it all the time and we recorded it, and and I thought, wow, these sounds, the tintabulation, and the bells everywhere, and the combination of Glock and harp and celeste and what have you. But of course, that's already in Vaughan Williams, and it's certainly in the Planets, big time. And it's difficult, this piece, if I'm not mistaken, was premiered in its original version before the Planets, right? Or
Yep.
contemporaneously.
Yep.
So who's who's invented this mystery? But there's no question that the echoes of Respighi are very, very strong for me. And Debussy, of course, I mean, the Sunken Cathedral, of course, and the open fifths, and of course, that world is there. And, uh, um, the, the studies with Ravel later, and um, I think the whole French sensibility, the poetry, the un-Germanness of it all is very, very important, because I think Vaughan Williams is trying desperately, with all respect for the great Elgar, he was trying very, very much to get rid of this German overcoat, the influence. There must be another way to express Britishness somehow, the national mood. And through his relationship with the Tudor music that he so loved, and his fascination with anything having to do with folk tunes, the modal scales that basically were his alphabet, plus what he did keep from the Germanness was this amazing, and he developed this amazing feel for structure. Because whereas Holst, was particularly good in the small forms, Vaughan Williams already had this amazing sense of the longer breath and the longer arc. So early on, where the Sea Symphony has its ebullience is undeniable, but it's not yet exactly, except in certain moments, for instance, the beginning of the second movement, and the finale. That's when we see the real Vaughan Williams, the darker sides of it, perhaps.
Yeah. But you mentioned earlier the brooding sort of mystery of London that you hear in the music. You linked it to sort of fog, and the dirt, I guess, of Edwardian London. But I wonder if across all the movements there's a deeper darkness that somehow is a commentary on London of its time and social unrest, that sort of thing, which is even more obvious in the uncut, the original version of the London Symphony. Is that the sort of darkness that you detect beyond fog?
Well, I think do you know, when we talk about fog in general, there's somehow always a literary, or it alludes to something else. Obviously, if you're an artist, that's what you think. You don't just say, "Oh, you can't see 10 feet in front of you." It's not. That's banal, I think. But it creates atmosphere and suggests menace, fear, impending doom, even. So I think that is very, very much what that is saying. But of course, Vaughan Williams is somehow always drawn to the seraphic, also seraphic gesture, that this, if you imagine an image where something starts in blackness, and as it goes up, it turns into something luminous. That's a very, very simplistic way of saying it, but it's something akin to that, I believe. His finales, the search for some kind of Brucknerian trudge towards something more elevated than the ordinary human experience.
In which case, Sir Antonio, I must ask you at the very last chord of the symphony, is it optimism or worry, concern, apprehension? It's an interesting chord, isn't it? Is it purely golden or is it something else?
Well, no, but you have to say, but he reaches the golden, but look what happens to it. It dissipates, doesn't it? It dissipates. The violins let go. The violas, cellos, and basses are hanging. The violas let go. The cellos and basses hang on for what seems like an eternity. It's in a way, it's a to be continued kind of idea. Yeah. There's great love in the symphony. You mustn't forget. He never said it was about London. He said it was a symphony written by a Londoner.
Whatever that means.
Exactly. Whatever that means, yes. But I think any Londoner will have his own definition of whatever that is. And I think that any love story is full of, the opposite. And the love and hate, and you feel that in the symphony very strongly. And you say to yourself, why is this happy? I mean, it's not a celebration. It's an indictment, and yet it's huge affection. And that's what marriage is about. That's what love is about, I think.
Well, that's absolutely fascinating. We could go on talking about this sort of detail forever. Let me just ask you, though, about the orchestra, the London Symphony Orchestra, which has this great tradition of playing, recording Vaughan Williams. And we talk about, yes, the word tradition. Is it evident when you stand up to conduct Vaughan Williams with the London Symphony Orchestra that it is in their bloodstream? We use that as a sort of cliched phrase, don't we? But are there practical, technical ways in which that tradition helps in a performance like the one you've just given?
I think because a lot of Vaughan Williams' music is very lyrical, it can easily become generalized. He's very fastidious, especially in this symphony, with the dynamics. I mean, the number of triple Ps that he writes, and they're very difficult to achieve, by the way. You can achieve PP, pianissimo, with a certain amount of effort. 3 Ps is really hard because there's the danger of losing the tone, that the tone becomes without any body, or it becomes disembodied, which is an effect you can use on occasion. But when you're listening to long stretches, excuse me, of disembodied sound, it gets dull. It can, so it has to be infused with an intensity all the time. That is difficult. I don't care what orchestra it is. That is difficult to achieve, and you've got to work on it. You've also, I think young people today don't have that, is a great word in Italian, disinvoltura, this almost happy-go-lucky, da, 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 that kind of, or somebody whistling in the street,
Love that.
To get that rhythm exactly right, on the page, it's written da da dum da da dum da 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 da, but it's not that. It has to jump off the page and, like a young newspaper boy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
and you have a
so
head start, because the orchestra has played this music in the past.
yes, but you'll be surprised at how you have to work on those things. What seemingly nothing things or obvious things are not obvious to this generation. They're not. And so you have to go after it and bring them into your memory and or jog their memories.
Yeah,
Do you know what
yeah.
I mean?
Talking of bringing the past into the present, I suppose an obvious question I should be asking you is, does the sound of the London Symphony still work for the London of today?
My job as music director is not only to maintain a high level of technical finish, um, but to have that the orchestra has an allure in its sound. So many orchestras are really, really good, but do they have an allure? I don't know. And allure, I think, is something that not many orchestras have, and I think it's in the rehearsal time that you, again, through sometimes even imagery, literary uh, images, painting, food, you name it. I use everything to spur something beyond just playing beautifully.
Yeah,
That's not enough for me. And I think their sound is for me to make the sound, because also my opera conducting, the necessity to make things quite dramatically clear. And, if you play a tremolo is I mean, for a symphonic musician, a tremolo is one thing. For an operatic musician, a tremolo is something completely different. And a lot of tremolos in this piece, and quick tremolos,
yeah.
and they have to sizzle and they have to roar. The number of times I mentioned the MGM Lion, that kind of thing is very, very important,
Yeah, yeah.
to spur on, the emotional intelligence that is at work with an orchestra as wonderful as the London Symphony. You
Yeah.
just push those buttons, you're going to get certain responses.
Yeah, my question about the relevance of the London Symphony today really was about whether the music itself could be held to describe the London that we still live in. You think about the brooding darkness, for example. Is that something that is still here?
Well, certainly not to the same extent in terms of the weather, but in terms of the political situation, we are in, well, for some, we're in very dark times. And I think the uncertainty in the world and, these powder kegs all over the place, that, there are too many fuses waiting to be lit. And I think that we're living in with that kind of fear. It's not so much in the foreground, but it's certainly in the background.
Yeah. Well, look, that's been absolutely fascinating to hear those very, very detailed, considered thoughts about conducting this symphony. I've been in raptures just listening here to you. Just before we go, Vaughan Williams operas, with your massive operatic background, are you going to be exploring Vaughan Williams opera at any
Well,
stage, do you think?
I've downloaded the scores now, one step at a time. I'm fascinated by Riders to the Sea, and I just haven't, because I've had so many other fish to fry at the moment. I haven't delved in, but I would like certainly to do in concert form one of the operas. Definitely, that's going to come, and this has been a new adventure for me, and I bring a lot of experience to the table, of course, um, but um, it's enriched my life so much, this music. And this week, to be doing the Second Symphony and Flos Campi and Dona, Nobis, Pacem, I mean, that's a lot. It's a lot because it has many different facets of his art, and the many different faces of him. And so I feel like I'm most fortunate to have this new world open up to me. I in the opera, that happened very rarely because had conducted almost everything I wanted to do. But in the symphony world, those those territories are still to be discovered for me,
Yeah.
and it's just really, really great.
Well, seeing you talk with such passion there, I presume that you won't think twice about suggesting Vaughan Williams' music abroad. I'm sure you have done already, but if it's as important as you suggest, then it should be out there internationally.
Yes, that's a fight, for some reason, but I'll try to be a very good soldier.
Well, look, Sir Antonio, thank you so much for your time. That's been absolutely fascinating. Thanks from the Vaughan Williams Society and certainly from me. Thank you, Sir Antonio.
Thank you very much.